Let me see if we are. No. Yeah, we're live. Hey, Michael. This is tricky without my battle buddy. This is a two-man show. How are you doing?
I'm excellent. Yourself?
Oh, good. Thanks. You look like you have a fancy chair there.
It's a comfy chair. I realize that having to sit as much as I do behind a screen, that you know, my body's getting older, and so it needed something to soften the blow a little bit.
I know. I hurt my back a couple of weeks ago. I don't know if I've seen you in 2 weeks, but anyway, I hurt at the gym a couple of weeks ago, and if I didn't already have an acupuncturist appointment scheduled with the VA, this happened on Saturday. On Monday, like, I probably still wouldn't be walking.
Yeah,
phenomenal.
It's amazing how many things happen now that I used to just shrug off. Like, I slept funny the other night, and then all of a sudden I'm driving the car and I go to turn my neck to look, and I'm like, oh, it doesn't want to turn anymore. You know, it's like, wow, all right, this is what it's like.
Oh, that's so funny. Well, I guess good morning, Michael Zanetti, founder of TradesFactor. For the audience, we're sitting here talking about how old we are, and they're like, who's this guy? Where's Rosie?
Right.
So I first met Michael in 2015. Was it 2015 when you were at you were a waves company, Tampa Bay Waves Company?
Yeah, I think so. It sounds about right. It's been a few years, but
it's been a while. And then I also know Michael's wife, Loretta. She's still serving in the reserves and also an entrepreneur. And then reconnected, I think, or we've been in the same entrepreneurial circles in Tampa ever since. But on top of being the founder of TradesFactor, which I'll let Michael share with the audience about that, he's also one of the most recent Bunker Labs ambassadors, helping Aaron Caldwell with the Veteran in Residence incubator out of WeWork in downtown, which is awesome. So Michael, tell everybody a little bit about yourself, and just touch on your military background, and tell us about TradeFactor.
Sure. So me personally, I've been in Tampa now for about 10 years. I'm originally from New York City, and went from New York, went to the Virginia Military Institute and got my commission in the Army. And I was a field artillery guy. So for me, my home base was in Germany. I was in the Big Red 1, the 1st Infantry Division. And from there did all kinds of exciting and fun things. They said, sign up and see the world. And yes, I got to go see the world. So that was, that they made good on that promise. And eventually after, deploying and kind of transitioning back into civilian life, I ended up going to business school, became a management consultant, and right around the time I was ending one of the contracts that I was on, a former classmate of mine, Army vet himself, had approached me about a concept that is now known as TradesFactor. And he was in an interesting situation where he was trying to facilitate bringing labor into the Canadian market for the construction company that he was working for at the time. It was a Fortune 100 company, and they could not find enough bodies to work on this massive rail yard project that they had secured, to the point where he was importing talent from outside of the country. And it just kind of struck him as odd, because this shouldn't be the case, right? There should be a better, faster, cheaper way of getting these types of skill sets into that market, especially because this was not in the middle of nowhere. This was in a major metropolitan area, so it should have been a lot easier. And he had a computer science background and kind of looked at it through the lens of, well, what can we do with technology? And started poking around to see what in the industry was there. And bottom line is that no one was really building software for the construction, the manufacturing, the mining industry. It was in the periphery. And part of the reason for that is most of the folks who build these types of tools are building it for problems that they experience, right? Like they're addressing the challenges and the pain points in their world. which is why I like to joke, like there's no shortage of apps for getting pizza delivered, right? Because everybody wants that and needs that. But the pain points in the construction space, for example, are just not as well understood by the people in Silicon Valley and elsewhere that work in tech. And for the people who operate in those industries, it's not in their DNA to say, I'm going to go and launch a software company to support what I'm doing. I'm going to go build a better mousetrap. You know, for them, they're typically focused on operations, and it's a very projectized environment. So, you know, they compete, they bid, they win the bid, and then everybody's focus is on how do we build that bridge? How do we get that building put up in record time, and at the same time, not lose money, make sure that it's safe and it's compliant, scramble to bring in a bunch of specialized labor. And then as soon as the project is complete, we let everybody go, because we're not designed to keep everything in place. We move from project to project. So it's a very unique world. And a lot of times when you talk to people who are not in that industry and you mention this concept of trades workers, you know, immediately they think of contractors in their head. And the common parlance for contractor is just that. It's somebody that you hire for a particular job and they get paid as, you know, a 1099, they're a contractor, and then they go on their way. But the problem is construction is so risky and there's a lot of safety requirements that go into it. As soon as you cross that threshold of telling someone how to do a job, i.e. giving them a safety briefing, giving them certain equipment, you can't categorize them as a contractor. They're your employee. And so that opens up a whole new world of regulation and requirement where these companies are, you know, when they find their talent, they have to put them through that same exact process of hiring this individual as if they were hiring somebody on the staff side of the house, meaning someone who's going to be in the marketing department, someone who's going to be in the finance department, and they may stick around for, you know, 3 to 5 years. That process and the software that supports that transaction, they have to use the same tools and equipment for somebody who may get hired for 6 weeks because they're coming in just to do concrete, for example. And as you can imagine, when you take software off the shelf and it's not designed for the world that you operate in, you start going down this rabbit hole of workarounds where people will go and try and fit the square peg into the round hole, where they, you know, make modifications to something that really wasn't designed to address their challenges. And so for TradesFactor, that's where we came along and we said, you know, there's an opportunity here, because this was a real problem that my co-founder Brady was trying to solve, and realized that, you know, not only could we solve this problem, but we could actually make a business out of addressing it as well. And so TradesFactor was originally born really on the finding of the labor side of the equation, right? We knew that labor was very transient. Labor in this space moved from project to project. And so there was always going to be a demand for, how do we find labor? How do we find better labor? And, you know, for years, it's been very much the same methodology, which is put an ad on the radio, put an ad, you know, on Facebook, and just hope that you get people in that are somewhat qualified. But the amount of bad fits that come in are huge. I mean, in some cases, you're looking at a 10-to-1 ratio of unqualified candidates, you know, for that one billet, and the number of people that have to sift through those resumes, look at the applications, try to discern who is actually going to be value added to the project. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of overhead. It's very inefficient. And so we were focusing on, how do we qualify these workers and make them a much better fit for the company that's looking to hire, without them having to invest a whole lot of time and energy and people in that process, so that they could be more confident in who they were going to source, instead of having someone show up at a job site and say, well, yeah, you know, I've seen somebody weld. I figured I could just, you know, figure it out as I go on the job, which absolutely happens. So that was the original focus of it. And as time marched on, you know, companies started to look at this as, well, what else can I do with taking this labor component and having it talk to the other systems that maybe I'm using, whether that's for payroll or accounting or cost estimating, project management, et cetera. And so that's when TradesFactor started to scale up into something that's more of a holistic HR solution, where you can use the platform to go and find labor for sure, but then you can take that labor in the platform. You can put them through your onboarding process where you have customized forms, everything that you would use at your company to specifically get them into the job site and get them signed up properly, and then start talking to the payroll system and making sure that the time tracking for hours and whatnot is taken care of. And all of that can happen via the integration. So for smaller companies, they could use the entire suite as their hub, as the foundation for them for running that side of their business. And then for larger companies, they can insert and plug and play the different aspects that they're missing, the gaps that are there relative to the tools they may already have, and then just pull out whatever reports they have. It's really unlocking the data that lives in silos and moving it around more freely in between the different segments and departments of the companies that operate in this space. And so it's been quite a journey. It's been a learning experience for sure. And no 2 years have been exactly the same, but we're very excited about what we've built and what the future holds. And I think that as people in this space, in construction and in manufacturing, really recognize the options and the opportunities that exist by leveraging technology, especially technology that's built specifically for those industries, I think you're going to see a lot more adoption and a lot of changes in the way that work gets done. So it's been fun, and I hope that a little more than a 30-second elevator pitch, but hopefully that answered some questions.
No, yeah, I think it sounds like, in the construction industry, it's almost like the gig economy, that the skilled labor, they work project to project. And every project they go to, then they have to be completely onboarded, which sounds very laborious and time consuming for the construction company and the HR departments of those construction companies to do with every project. And as the initial pain point that you were trying to solve was really manpower, skilled manpower issues for the construction companies, and then realize that not only could TradesFactor be the solution for their manpower issues, but also for their technology issues, where all of their systems weren't talking together. It's very archaic. And now you have the architecture, essentially through TradeFactor, to pull all of that together.
Yep, that's correct. I mean, and it's not even for just the worker and the company, but now there's an element for the school side of the house as well, because what you're seeing is, because of the demand for skilled trades labor and the fact that a lot of people who are in that age bracket where retirement is starting to make sense, there's this gap, because you have a cohort of people that are getting ready to retire or have already retired. That was the high watermark for skilled trades workers in this country. They in turn had children who they encouraged to go to college and not necessarily follow in their footsteps. And so there was this valley of labor, which is why everyone's looking for the same people. And now what you're starting to see is there's an uptick in a new generation who is intrigued by the trades, because traditional college costs have continued to skyrocket. The value prop of coming out with student loan debt, sometimes north of 6 figures, isn't translating into the type of outcome as far as compensation is concerned that makes sense for everybody to go to college, or that kind of college. The fact that there is demand and wages rise in the skilled trades, you're seeing this let me take a secondary look at what the trades are all about, and maybe this isn't so bad. Maybe I should give it some consideration. But these are people that are starting out with no track record, no real history. And so when they go to a technical college or they go to a trade school of some sort, how do you take that information that they've learned and the knowledge and then start to package it in a way that will resonate with the HR departments of the companies that are looking to hire? So in some markets, there are very big employers that can support them. But by and large, we're not talking about companies that have international footprints. These are very local companies. Sometimes they only operate in one city or they operate in one region. So with schools using TradesFactor as their digital learning management system, now they can track their grades. They create this archive and this record of how they've performed in a schoolhouse environment instructor recommendations, things that will help paint a picture of how reliable is this person going to be. And yes, I know that they're brand new to carpentry, but we suspect that they're going to be a good fit based on how they've performed. And then all this information, which is digital, will follow that worker around as they go. So it's getting built upon as they get hired into each new company. So it gives companies a little bit more insight into who they're getting when someone's fresh out of school. It just lowers their risk a little bit. And for the worker, it's making life easier because now all this stuff is consolidated. It's in a centralized place where all the relevant information that somebody's going to want to know about them from a professional standpoint is in one place, and it's going to get ported around for them as they move on. And so that's also where we see opportunity is earlier upstream in that process, getting people that are in high school that are taking shop classes and thinking about going down this path. That's where you're going to get the next generation of trades workers. And we see ourselves as being a solution for helping them integrate into the industry much more easier.
That's great. And it sounds, you're almost essentially credentialing the skills that they have. In healthcare staffing, that is a requirement, when a hospital or you submit resume or whatnot for a doctor or nurse, they go through what's called credentialing. It's verifying their education and experience. And it makes it, of course, you want the right credentialed doctor and nurse, whenever you go to the hospital. So I think that's great, especially when you're fresh out of training, school, whatever. You don't really understand how to capture or know what best to capture in your, what you've learned in school or what you've experienced in your first job or two, and having it all already done for you through TradesFactor would a benefit to not only the potential employer, but the individual skilled labor. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what do you think has been the most valuable lesson that you took from the military and utilizing it or implementing it within your company?
Well, I think the Army in particular is really big on how to do a risk assessment, but to do it quickly. And I don't mean, from the context of like, hey, let's put together this matrix and figure out, what's going to be, the worst possible thing that could happen. I mean, in the heat of the moment, while you're trying to make decisions, you're constantly assessing what do you have in terms of resources and what are the threats that are in front of you and how do you balance those two so that you can make a decision and not just stay stagnant. And I think that in the business world, there's very much a trap that you can fall into where you stay steady state. You get a little comfortable and you don't maybe think about what could potentially come around the corner, and then how do you react and respond to it so that you're positioned to leverage everything as a benefit or as an advantage. And I'll use COVID as an example. Nobody 2 years ago would have remotely thought about how to deal with things getting shut down and people working remotely, and and we were no exception to that. But one of the big differences is when that came along, we view that as, okay, well, this is the new reality. We're not going to, sit there and cry about it because it wasn't good, but it wasn't bad. But we viewed it as, well, how do we leverage this into something that we can, capture and use to grow and to do better? I mean, that's, the Army mentality is, it's great to plan for stuff, but most plans will fall apart as soon as they make contact with the enemy. So it's good to go through that process of thinking through it, but don't get hung up on being married to the plan itself. And so our LMS, the learning management system, was something that came born out of that. It had been on our roadmap because we knew that schools wanted a way for delivering information and tracking information, but COVID accelerated the fact that now it was more acceptable to do things in a remote environment. And it'll never be 100%, right? Because we're talking about skilled trades where people need to get in there and actually know how to fire a torch and do welding and things. But there's a lot that can be communicated digitally and remotely. And so being able to leverage the technology to put that information out there and maybe change the way a cohort goes through a class, that was an opportunity that we were able to pivot to in the middle of things, you know, becoming more remote. And I credit the Army for that, because the Army was all about think quickly and, you know, come up with a plan. And as soon as something happens, go back and reassess and then move out. Don't sit there and, well, let's have a meeting, we'll have a committee, we'll discuss it, we'll debate it. It's like, nope, we got to do it and execute. And so I think
have a meeting to have another meeting.
Right, exactly. And so I think that's definitely one of the big benefits of the Army background, is that you realize that, you know, executing quickly on a plan of attack, a plan of action, is going to yield you much better results than just sitting around and discussing it ad nauseum, because you'll never get 100% consensus or 100% perfect solution. So
yeah, you know, you saying you're not going to get 100% of or the perfect solution. Being Action Zone, specializing in the, oh, I just realized I didn't change my name. I'm I'm Rosie today, but
okay.
Specializing in the ideation stage of the entrepreneurial journey. We have a lot of entrepreneurs who are working their business model through our program, and they feel like they need to have it completely like done perfect 100% before they
Right.
actually launch their business. Or we are a huge proponent of you know, keep your entrepreneurial idea, your aspirations as a side hustle until it consumes you with time and money,
Right.
you know, to replace your income before you actually, you know, become a full-time entrepreneur. There's a lot of reasons for that, but one of the reasons is because if you're waiting for the 100% solution, like you are causing your own barrier to entry for the most
Right.
part. You know, 60-70%, let's flip the sign from closed to open and let's start making money. So yeah, I totally appreciate you saying, like, you're never going to get it 100%. You're never going to get it perfect. But you know, entrepreneurs by nature are very agile. So, you know, as it starts creeping up to 70-80% to what you want, then you'll be able to quickly maneuver in, you know, as your company changes or evolves. So that's awesome. You know, I often get this question: how do you and your husband survive not only being married but also as business partners? Because we
Right.
work the business together, but you and Loretta, though both entrepreneurs, don't work the same business. You know, hers is Erasable Ink, Medi Spa, and you with TradesFactor. Do you find it like a challenge, or is it beneficial that, you know, you get two entrepreneurs under the same roof, but different businesses?
Yeah, no, I think it's absolutely a benefit, because it goes back to the mindset. You know, when you have two people who think entrepreneurially and understand what goes into that, there's a lot more, I think, appreciation for the hours of work and when you have to work. And, you know, I need to go to this meeting, I need to take this call, I have to take this trip. You know, I think it's more of a challenge when one spouse is much more 9 to 5, very regimented, and like when work is over, and that's what they expect, versus in the startup world, you're never really off. You know, it's never really over. And so if you expect, you know, this dinner to be uninterrupted and we're going to enjoy the conversation, and then one person's phone keeps buzzing, that can create some tension because your expectation is going to be different than theirs. But if you both get it, because you realize, look, sometimes a fire pops up and I have to put it out, that is just par for the course. But, you know, number one, it doesn't happen all the time. But more importantly, I think that when you want to talk through things, even if they're different businesses and different industries, just talking about, you know, the day-to-day, they become a really good sounding board, because they can understand, you know, they can appreciate what you're going through and, you know, the challenges that you face, because it is very different than being an employee what you go through on a daily basis. And so, it's something where I think for us, it's an asset, it's a benefit. It never really gets turned off. Like we always talk about it, because it's always there, but we feed off of it from each other. So I think that's a win. I mean, I can't speak for everybody, but I know for us, it's definitely a good thing.
That's great. Yeah, that's Action Zone. We always invite the spouses and their family members, if they want, children or whatever, to participate in our programming as well, alongside the student, in our cohorts, because even though it's not a family business, it's a family affair.
Right.
If both of them, because it does affect the entire family. My father was an entrepreneur for most of my childhood, that I was living at home, and even the phone rings and dad's got to take it. We're out on a trip, and dad's got to take the call. It's definitely a family affair, and I think that what we try to do is take away that friction point by introducing the world of entrepreneurship to the non-entrepreneurial spouse.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think, speaking about the Army as being, the catalyst for that, it's very much the same way. You're never really off duty, especially if you're in a leadership role. You're 24/7. I mean, you have to know about your people and what's going on. You don't really clock out and then just say, oh, I'm done, and then even if you're on leave, you're still plugged in. You're not really able to ever turn it off. And so I think that if you have that background, it's that much easier to make the transition, because you're not, it's not a huge lifestyle change. You're used to being that connected to the organization and the people you're responsible for. So I think that definitely is one advantage you've got, coming out of the military.
Yeah, it's funny you say off duty. I don't know if you can read my hat. It says for service, it's officially off duty. So I just happened to run across this hat, and I was like, oh, it's very appropriate. Well, Michael, thank you so much for your time this morning. I know you're super busy running your business and helping other entrepreneurs in the Tampa Bay area, with that aspire to be entrepreneurs and building and growing their own business. We have actually a cohort, an Action Zone cohort, that is going to be starting sometime after Labor Day weekend. I know Rosie has sent me the date, but right now it eludes me. But we're having a couple of information sessions. The first one will be August 12th, and the second one is August 16th. I will drop the Eventbrite registrations in the chat whenever we get done. So if you have some entrepreneurial aspirations and you want to know what Action Zone is all about and how we can help you build and grow your business, join us for one of those two information sessions. Again, Michael, thank you so much for joining us in the zone. And I think I'm going to see you this week at WeWork.
Yep. Sounds like a plan. And thank you very much for the invite. Always a pleasure.
All right. Take care. Bye.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.